Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We begin today with our world lead. The Trump administration under intense pressure from Congress to send a stronger, decisive message to Saudi Arabia for its alleged role in the disappearance and possible murder of a Washington Post journalist. A source telling CNN that Turkish officials told their American counterparts that they're in possession of video and audio evidence proving the execution of Jamal Khashoggi, a frequent critic of the Saudi regime, inside of the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey. This comes as we're learning that prior to his disappearance, U.S. intelligence officials intercepted Saudi communications about a plan to capture Khashoggi, according to the Washington Post. I asked the Office of the Director of National Intelligence if that's true. Why did the U.S. not warn Khashoggi? I was told no comment. U.S. lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are demanding consequences for anyone involved. There has been a worldwide backlash, with various corporations and media organizations, including CNN, pulling their support and or involvement in a major investment summit in Saudi Arabia at the end of this month, led by the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS. As of now, the Trump administration still plans on participating. They're sending Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. CNN White House correspondent Boris Sanchez joins me now live from Lebanon, Ohio, where President Trump will speak in a little bit. Boris, the White House has invested a great deal in its relationship with MBS, with the Saudi regime, and frankly, the White House doesn't seem eager to talk about this.
That's right, Jake. President Trump not answering reporters' questions as he left the White House on his way to Ohio. Unclear if he's going to mention Jamal Khashoggi here in his rally in Lebanon, or if he is going to repeat his common refrain, his attacks on journalists and the media, something that has become a staple of these events. One thing the president is likely to mention, though, the release of Pastor Andrew Brunson, that American that had been imprisoned in Turkey, something that the White House had long pressed for his release, and something that will likely rile up the president's evangelical base. As the world focuses on the possible killing of a Washington Post journalist in Turkey, allegedly at the hands of U.S. ally Saudi Arabia, President Trump is celebrating the release of American pastor Andrew Brunson from Turkish custody. Trump tweeting, quote, "My thoughts and prayers are with Pastor Brunson, and we hope to have him safely back home soon." Then tweeting, "Pastor Brunson just released, will be home soon." Brunson's release comes at a peculiar time when Turkey is ratcheting up pressure on Saudi Arabia to show evidence that journalist Jamal Khashoggi is still alive. Saudi Arabia has denied any involvement in the disappearance of Khashoggi, a frequent critic of that country's leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who welcomed Trump on his first trip abroad as president and has since maintained close relations with son-in-law Jared Kushner.
Are you concerned about this Saudi journalist?
This week, President Trump has been asked several times about Khashoggi.
I do not like it.
Despite mounting evidence that the journalist was killed, Trump is still not pointing the finger at Saudi Arabia.
The Saudi government responsible?
Well, I have to find out who did it, but people saw him go in, but they didn't see him come out, as they understand it, and we're going to take a very serious look at it. It's a terrible thing.
The president's focus, a major arms deal with Saudi Arabia, which Republicans and Democrats in Congress are now potentially blocking.
That would be hurting us. We have jobs. We have a lot of things happening in this country. Frankly, I think that would be a very, very tough pill to swallow for our country.
And while more than a dozen global business leaders and prominent organizations, including CNN, pull out of an upcoming conference hosted by the Saudi Crown Prince, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin says he will attend.
I am planning on going at this point. If more information comes out and changes, we could look at that, but I am planning on going.
And Jake, a quick note about the president's schedule for early next week. He tweeted out this afternoon that he would be visiting areas affected by Hurricane Michael in Georgia and Florida, tweeting out to residents of those areas, quote, "We are with you." Jake.
All right, Boris Sanchez with the president in Ohio. CNN senior international correspondent Arwa Damon has been digging into this mystery. She joins us now live from Istanbul, Turkey. Arwa, have the Turks presented any of this audio and video evidence they've told U.S. officials they have that would prove that this journalist was in fact murdered in the Saudi consulate?
Not publicly, Jake, not at this stage, but information that we have been able to obtain about the contents of these video and audio recordings is, to say the least, quite chilling. Turkish authorities are claiming they have audio and video recordings from within the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, which prove Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi was killed inside. That's according to a source familiar with the investigation who was briefed by Western intelligence. In the recordings, the source says that you can hear the assault, the struggle that took place, and that there is also evidence of the moment Khashoggi was murdered. The existence of these tapes would explain why Turkey was quick to blame Saudi Arabia for Khashoggi's killing, and that the U.S. working assumption is that he was murdered in the consulate, according to a U.S. official. The BBC also released audio of an off-air conversation they had with Khashoggi, a former Saudi royal insider turned critic, 3 days before his disappearance.
When do you think you might be able to go home again?
I don't think I will be. I don't think I'll be able to go.
Feelers every now and again, test the temperature, or.
You see, when I hear of an arrest of a friend who did nothing that worth to be arrested, make me feel I shouldn't go.
Turkish authorities have identified 15 Saudi men as persons of interest. Only hours before Khashoggi went missing, several of them were caught on camera arriving in Istanbul. Saudi officials have denied any involvement in the disappearance of Khashoggi, but on Capitol Hill, there are bipartisan calls for action.
It's disgusting, and especially if the accusation of killing, dismembering his body, there needs to be some consequences.
I think sanctions should be applied under the Magnitsky Act if the evidence supports what we believe took place inside that embassy.
But the Trump administration has been hesitant to blame Saudi Arabia, especially Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is reportedly close with the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner.
I think the Saudis themselves are being damaged because we don't have the facts out.
And as far as getting those facts, the State Department says they're waiting on a report from the Saudi ambassador.
My understanding is that he's on his way back there. We said when you come back, we'd like to get a report from you.
And of course, Jake, we're also waiting to hear back on what, if anything, comes out of this joint Turkey-Saudi Arabia working group.